Hi everyone, this is Swarnabha Gupta from Team Upaj, and we are here with Season 2, Episode 1. We took a long break for quite a few months because we had to do our bit of research and studying so that we can take this series forward and shortlist our next guests. And here we are opening this season with a banger. We have Dr. Kaustuv Kanti Ganguli with us, and he's a performer, a musicologist, as well as a machine learning expert, and we are just really amazed to have him here today with us.
Thank you so much for the invitation, and really looking forward to having an engaging chat.
Same here, and thank you so much for agreeing to do this.
Sure. I think introductions will come, but scholar of music, that's it. So studying music from different perspectives, that's what I look at it.
And you've done some absolutely groundbreaking work. The entire team of Upaj, we are just really huge fans of your work, and we've been going through everything for the past few days. And personally, I was amazed because I have grown up with machines more than humans, with computers and electric guitars and amplifiers. So it really amazes me to see the heights you can push artificial intelligence and machine learning to in this era. And I really hope that you take your research further and we get even more amazing results from the AI actually digging deep into our culture, our heritage, and helping us take it forward as well.
Sure, I'm looking forward as much you are.
Okay, so we'll start this episode with, of course, the most generic question. So, how did your musical journey start?
Alright, I think the most difficult question, because I am not remembering that moment. It's just constructing from passive memories, secondary sources that I've heard. So basically it was like my home is a musical family. So I remember listening to music more than singing first. So, for example, Amir Khan Saab, Bade Ghulam Ali Khan Saab, so their recording used to play at home, and I used to get exposed to that. So that listening, the word sanskar, it's used in Hindi, so that was there. And then I started, not formally, but informally with my grandfather, late Phanindra Mohan Ganguly, when I was about 4. But that was just studying the solfege like Sa Re Ga Ma and all. And formally, I started around the age of 6 with Shruti Nandan, and then of course moved on to ITCSRA, and that followed. Yeah,
very beautiful. So you have trained extensively under the legendary Pandit Ajay Chakraborty ji. Like, we all know him, we all love his music, we've all grown up with it.
Right.
And I just want to ask you, how was the experience growing up with an ustad of that stature, and the talim you received, the satsang you received, and how it shaped your music as well as your personality and your soul, you as a human being?
Right.
So, please.
Yeah. Again, like, I have so many things in mind. It's hard to get like precise in words, but yeah, I think the discipline of learning how to learn, that was the most exciting one. But again, I realized that after maybe 20 years of learning. So learning is a methodology, but learning how to learn, it's kind of a year-long, like lifelong journey. And that keeps me going still now, like how to learn things by myself, how to learn things from peers. So I would say the thing that I would like cherish with utmost care is about how my questions were encouraged. Because I have been an inquisitive mind, and I always have been seeking logic, and that's how I am into AI and all.
Right.
So that was always encouraged, so which kept me going. And then of course I have had the privilege of sitting on stage. So one is like learning in classroom setting, The other one is learning on stage. So ultimately, if you are an aspiring performer, so then performance is also a learning.
Right.
Like it's something like in pedagogy, we learn with languages, but we perform the literature. But there is a disconnect, you see.
Absolutely.
So if you get the learning of the literature itself, your performance of the literature gets better. So that kind of practical learning was very important in my early career. That's something I would like to mention. Yeah.
That's really great. And on stage, adapting to the stage over the years, I think that's a big task that any performer has to.
Like, for example, performance, if you're singing for an audience, it's an interaction. So it's a duple communication. For example, I would say in the pandemic, when we were sitting and performing for the camera, it was very hard for me because I don't know who I'm singing for. Because on stage, if you're singing the same rag, same composition to different audience, it totally changes. So sometimes I prefer to have some lights on the audience to see how they're receiving. And coming to neuropsychology, because I think I need to get into the terminology slowly.
Yes.
So there is a theory called motor theory of speech perception. So that says unless you talk silently by your muscles, you cannot really understand. So you hear, but you don't listen. Like, for example, ear is an instrument. It's just a sensor.
Right.
But you listen through your brain. And that happens through the motor theory. Like, you reproduce silently. And that exact thing happens with the audience interaction. So the learned audience, like, wo jo wah wah aate hai. So it matches or surpasses their expectancy.
Right.
So many people come to concerts, they keep the beat. So that's the interaction, they're engaging. And we have to adapt with the audience. That's how the performance goes.
Right.
So yeah, so these are the kind of things. So yeah, that motor theory says that you have to have reproduced in your brain, even if silently. So we have to adapt the performance. We have to see or say gauge what to start with. Maybe I have set up my rag bandish in the green room, but I get a different vibe. Right. And as a performer, I want to be in unison with the vibe with the audience. So many times it happens that on stage, we have changed all the plans. And that's the fun part. And if you have your co-musicians enjoying the same, then you explore the whole thing again. So it's relearning of the rag, of the bandish in a new context.
Absolutely. And it's like that entire improvise, adapt, overcome.
Yeah.
Thing
that's what we see. Like, for example, if there is a question like I have got from many, it's my question too. What is the ideal performance? Like when you get satisfaction most. So I would say it's the relaxation of the riyaz. If you get on stage, that's kind of a successful performance.
Right.
Because you are relaxed, you don't have to prove yourself. You are enjoying what is being built. And that's what improvisation is, like what we have been told in the pedagogy.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
Speaking of riyaz, how was your riyaz schedule like while growing up? Because you were also a very intense student, if I may say, like really inquisitive and digging into areas where you're probably a pioneer. In case of Indian music, at least. And
I'm sure there are many scholars. I'm one of them. But yeah, I try to do things sincerely. So see, there are two aspects I believe. One is riyaz for the voice training as a vocalist or whatever is your instrument. Because that's the apparatus you have to manifest what is in your conceptual phase.
Right.
So that's very important.
Like maxing your motor skills out.
Exactly. So now for me, riyaz is growing reflex. Like something you don't have to think twice for the production aspect. So that you can engage your brain in thinking the creativity aspect. Because if you're not too sure that whether my voice will permit or my instrument will permit the manifestation or implementation of what I'm thinking, then you can't think further.
Absolutely.
So riyaz is kind of growing your reflex to make this hassle-free or say worry-free. Then you can think, and this kind of happens in a cycle. So you target something, okay, I want this to be achieved on my voice or on my instrument. And you do practice to gain dexterity.
Right.
Gain, say, something, what should I say? you don't have any stress, like very relaxed way of saying. So these are the kind of things. Then you set your target again higher. So it's the thinking and the like muscle memory practice. So this goes in cycle.
Both need to be hand in hand and at par in order to execute what you're thinking inside.
Exactly. For example, again coming to theory and practice, say Tihai. So there is a mathematical rationalization behind the Tihai.
Right.
But the fun or the excitement of the Tihai is in the unplanned part. Or in the imperfection, that slight, like for example, in Rupak Tal or say Jhumra Tal, if you have a Tihai, so it's 14 by 3, 7 by 3, it's an irrational number. So mathematically, you can't say it's equal division.
Absolutely.
That will not add up. But still, that gives us the highest adrenaline rush. That's the fun of
0.25, 0.5, let's do this, let's do that.
That imperfection gets you, so that reaction. So,
And so now coming to studying in Shruti Nandan and SRA. So as we all know that Indian classical music is a tradition which has been passed down by Guru Shishya Parampara. So that was the medium that has been used for centuries now, and Dheere Dheere now, as we've moved into the modern era, we have institutionalized education. So Indian classical music is also getting its institutionalized form at various prestigious colleges and universities all over the country and abroad. So since you have been, I think, a part of both in a way, so I would really like to know your opinion on how this institutionalization impacts our music in both positive and negative ways.
Just to clarify, I have not been in an educational institute of music.
Right. But you've been associated with...
Yeah, of course.
Yes.
So I think compartmentalizing the theory into modules, that definitely helps structure things better. So not even like, for example, I won't say the educational aspect of things. It's also to create learned listeners. Like not everybody should become would become a performer. So then who will listen?
Right.
So a larger aspect of, I think, this academic institutes is also to create learned listeners, scholars, musicologists who can think structurally and then imbibe the knowledge and pass on the knowledge. So we also need educators. And performance is one aspect of this. Like if there were no gurus, then whom would you go to learn? And then again, the question is, a successful guru and a successful performer may not be the same person. It's very rare to have both the qualities on the same person.
Right.
Because it happens in like any scholarly field. A good teacher, a good researcher may not be the same person. So research, I would say it's more of in-depth understanding of one domain. So you dig down deeper. And the other thing is professing on a larger scale. So one is breadth, one is depth. It's very highly likely to have both in one person, but it has to be very focused and like consciously different choice. So otherwise this is a very gray area. And I think academic institutions are working on very thoughtful way of creating both. Whereas the Guru Shishya Parampara, the main motive has been to create performers.
Absolutely.
Not necessarily scholars, educators.
Yes.
So I think the purpose was already very segregated, but if we rationally think, then we have the answer already.
Right.
Yeah.
Because without listeners, without educators and gurus, where would all the musicians go?
Yes, absolutely. And for the sake of say young kids who wants to learn, so if a very busy performer who travels the world may not have the time, but then there should be educators who are equally knowledgeable to imbibe the knowledge for the kids to get access, and maybe at some point they can go to a master class or eventually get to the like performers class. So it's practical to have this ecosystem so that the marketplace is like equipped with all kind of stakeholders.
That's like a very logical and beautiful answer. And you're one of the first people who gave me this answer. I've had various, because I asked this question to a lot of guests.
Okay.
Like who've been associated with either Ravindra Bharati or SRA or any other music college. And this is by far the most logical answer I've received.
I'm sure, like, if we all brainstorm together, we can get better.
Absolutely.
But this is from a very bird's eye view perspective that this makes sense.
Now, since we got into the education part, you have won a huge number of awards and scholarships in your life. You have stood first in the All India Radio National Music Competition, and you have received awards from the Ministry of Culture, from the Government of India, and also scholarships from NCPA.
Right.
Now, I really wanted to ask you, how do awards and accolades affect an artist's career? Both, of course, the professional aspect is, of course, there. It increases maybe their worth in the market as people choose to state it. But there is also one more impact, which is the psychological impact and the impact on his personality. There are a lot of people whom we've seen who outright change after receiving honors and everything. So, and our music is mostly associated to spirituality and Eastern philosophy, and it goes pretty much to real depths of these fields. So, how, for an Indian classical musician, how do awards, like, what do they mean? How do they affect him or her? Or
Okay, very, very deep question. I really appreciate you asking that.
Thank you.
I would comment on the early career awards. Like, for example, the ones you mentioned, the scholarships, the competitions, not really into awards like, say, Sangeet Natak Academy or Padma Awards. That's like later career awards. I think I am authoritative to tell about the early career, what I have achieved. So, these are definitely rewarding and reassuring that you are on a pathway in the healthy competition field. Because when we are young, we represent a region, but we are coming to a all India, like, it's a wider audience, wider field of practice. Now, having these awards where there is a fairness and the diversity, that reassures you, okay, I'm on the right path. And that, of course, is rewarding because you have to have that appreciation aspect to motivate yourself to go further. But again, coming back to whether it affects the performance aspect, I would say in a normal work field, it's like a CV where it clears the shortlisting, but once you're in the interview, they don't look at the CV, they look at your skills. So these are just the entry points to maybe a couple of great festivals, because these are the benchmarks who have not listened to you.
Yes.
But these are kind of your entry points. Okay, this person have got this, so must be some qualities are there. You get the first chance,
right,
but then have to prove your worth. It's your skill that will speak.
Absolutely.
So that's all.
Thank you so much. So the next question I want to ask you is about your PhD in electrical engineering. Your research subject was very interesting regarding that. It's computational modeling of melody that's present in raga music, right? So what made you pursue this path, and how was the experience?
I think I should get to the interesting story how I got into this, because then everything kind of flowed in. So I definitely had an engineering mindset, and I was studying signal processing and electrical engineering in my bachelor's. So very interesting connection happened in my final year of undergraduate, where there is a conference called FRSM, Frontiers of Research on Speech and Music. And it's one of the oldest conferences in India. It's a symposium started with the Scientific Research Department of ITCSRA. And ITCSRA used to be a co-sponsor, co-presenter of this conference. So I got this catalog in ITC, and I was excited enough to submit a paper without any expectations. I was a final year undergraduate student. My paper got through, but then it was amazing to meet computational musicologists or computational data scientists who care for music information retrieval. So then I thought, okay, this is the field I want to pursue. That's it. So I got into IIT Bombay. So I'm not getting to broad stories, but yeah, IIT Bombay had a digital audio processing lab It used to be basically a speech technology lab.
Okay.
But they started working on low-level feature extraction. Like, for example, from polyphonic music, can we extract the melody?
Right.
So those kind of
like for each layer, if you just get the mono audios for them.
Yeah. So from polyphonic, it's not having monophonic access.
Right.
So having pitch candidates and then having continuity constraints. So can you extract a continuous melody line? So it's basically pitch contour, pitch versus time.
Right.
Now, when I came into the group, so they were lacking someone who has access to both the fields. Because when some research has to start engaging Indian music, the vocabulary has to be understood by the music fraternity.
Right.
Which is not a very regular case. So they were struggling there. And I think I came to bridge the gap. And then we started talking about asking deeper questions and solving with more computational engineering methods.
That's very interesting. And for Indian music, I think this is completely new. Because even if musicologists have worked with music before, I think it's more of at the world music frontier.
Right. There has been some work, I would say, like for example in NCPA, there has been an Autrim project, but it's not automated so much. Like they had pitch extractions and visualizations, but then we started to automate things. So can we not only extract pitches, but can we segment them into transcribed notations? So that was one of the first problems I addressed. Now, after we have the sequence of the solfeges, the story doesn't end there. Now, the transitions are the most important.
Absolutely.
Now, can we model them using, say, vector quantization? And I'm not going into these terminologies, but like symbolic representation. So we are creating a score from the music, but the most crucial point is the ultimate aim is not to create a score, to find similarities and make it indexed, like searchable. Now with my model, we can do content-based retrieval. For example, in Raga Barwa, now this is one form.
Yes.
The other form. Now can the machine, given one query, extract you all the instances which are still that phrase, but not that exact phrase?
Like your stride from dha to re in how many different permutations
Yes, so maybe I'm skipping a bit, but it's the AI for intention modeling. So what's the intention of the performer? So that's the degree of differences which are clustered into the same entity. Like these are different identities getting the same entity, that this is a variation of that dhani re phrase.
Absolutely.
So it's for the machine to understand that someone has to train them what to look for.
Right.
And I think that kind of was the starting point, and then we made into more cognitive science, musical memory, and that went on and still going on.
Absolutely groundbreaking. And I never thought there would actually be a day where machines would learn how to interpret and analyze our music, because everyone keeps on saying it has a lot of complexities, which it actually does. We are dealing with continuous intervals of frequencies all the time, unlike how we have discrete ones in Western music. And it's absolutely amazing how you have just trained the computer to think this way. You have practically trained the AI to understand all the different parts of the raga, like the phraseology as you just explained, and then the landmarks, what are the key signatures of a raga's appearance, all those phrases, and kidhar kitna we have to wait and weigh out our notes before and after. So how was this entire process like? How was your experience doing this?
See, again, AI is another name of machine learning and statistics.
Right.
So machine learning means you have to make the machine learn, but first you have to have the answer yourself. So what this whole process done to me is to make me more rational, have more reasonability in answering and asking these questions. Now the thing is, like for example, in a search, melody search, what to look for. Like for example, if we are wanting to learn something, from a rendition, what do we look for? It's not the whole performance. There are signature elements, or I would say the crux of it, or the nucleus of it, which is the information carrying element. So now we had to find out. So you are mentioning about landmark. So landmark is kind of the nyas, which has been described as the pleasant pause.
Right.
Now, what is a pleasant pause? Why is it pause? Because it's like a life cycle. So in a 24-hour day, it's recommended that you rest for 8 hours. It's 1/3. Similarly, it's a 1 hour. If it's a 1 hour performance, you need to have a pause for 1/3, 20 minutes. Otherwise, it's too much of a material.
Right. You're always running.
Yeah. So there is the sakoon element, the peace.
Absolutely.
Has to be there. Now, 20 minutes pause doesn't mean silence. So there are intricate questions like what does silence mean in music? And many a times, this pause you took between two sentences make it more musical. So how to measure that pleasant pause? What should be the ratio? Because many a times what we, I'm again like taking the authority of generalizing, it's not the case. Many times it happens that maybe we do a tail drop because we are on a note but thinking of the next. The attention goes away.
Right.
And if you listen closely, there is a tail drop, which should not be the case. Like this all enriched my own music. So I started looking at more objectively, more with a focal lens.
Right. Plus, it also enables you to curate the phrases very carefully in your own performance.
Absolutely. And what is the information carrying element? For example, I'd give a natural language thing. So come here. If you want to do an SMS language, the essential, bare essential is CMHR.
Yes. Right.
Just the consonants that carries the information. But you can't utter without the support of vowel. So vowel has the energy carriers. So I try to find an analogy. So in a phrase, because the phrase gets time warped, right? In the Vilambit to Drut.
Right.
Is it linear? No.
Not really.
Then the non-linearity can be learned. So if a phrase is a 7 second long in Vilambit and gets 4 seconds long in Drut, where is the time compressed? And then we found that the compression takes place within those steady note segments. Those are the landmarks. So that is the absorbing element. Like Chayanat. The pa got small.
Right.
But the mean never got small. If you it's not Chayanat anymore. So that information carrying element which doesn't let you play around with time warping, those are the signature elements of the phrase that makes it Chayanat.
Right. Absolutely.
But Pa and Re gives the energy to sustain it in the Vilambit. So these are the kind of things so that's the thing, there is no theory. We are reverse engineering from performance to create the theory, and that's the most exciting part.
This entire reverse engineering process, and it must take a lot of your time and effort and ear fatigue.
I would not say fatigue, it's ear engagement.
Of course, but then it's like same audio loop.
I was doing my PhD in an engineering department in IIT, but I was so happy 24 hours I was listening to music. So it was also riyaz of thinking. Because algorithms is easy to program, but hard to think.
Right.
What should be the parameter? How do we optimize that?
How to make that think?
Yeah. So optimizing an algorithm also optimizes your performance.
Right.
And I had a one-to-one access. So it was relearning. So that's the most engaging and interesting part for me.
So during this research, I think your musicality, the way you think and you approach your performances, and not just performances, music in general, that really heightened, we can say heightened, or it just took a different turn altogether?
I have not really measured, good question. But one thing I definitely say, I had to switch hats so consciously. Because there was a time I'm sitting in front of an audience singing Sekeda Sama, and I'm looking at the graph in front of my eyes. And I didn't want to do that, because the performance when I'm sitting to perform the rag, then again coming back to your question of spirituality.
Yes.
And the surrenderedness. So then it should not be cerebral.
Right.
So switching on and off and changing hats. But that was a very insightful experience for me.
And very challenging as well, I guess.
Yeah. Now I can safely switch off, switch on. I can do that. But it was a struggling phase, yes.
Now, as you again mentioned spirituality, I had one more question. So these areas that you worked in are all very rational and logical. It's a very good way to rationalize your performance, the ragas, and get the maximum joy out of that raga with proper curation of phrases and everything that we discussed. Now, you've also done a lot of research on the aesthetic part of our music, how it affects the human brain,
right?
Its therapeutic properties. So I would really love to know more about that from you.
Sure. So as an engineer, I always go for measurements. So if there is an action going on, how can we measure? How can we evaluate? How can we migrate that into a different transformed domain? So the interesting question for me, many people say, this person is not emotional. It's a very common statement. Now my question is whether the manifestation of emotion and the quotient of emotion the same thing. To me, no. A person can be very emotional. The outburst is not statistically significantly similar to the general kind, the average.
Right.
Does not necessarily warrant that the person is not emotional.
He just might have a different outlook.
Yeah, different outlook, different expressivity. So then there has to be measurements. So all this spirituality, these are metacognitive skills.
Absolutely.
So I started with the cognitive level. That's more manageable with my skill sets. So I would say there are 4 pillars to this in the whole work I have done. One is, of course, acoustics, which is the signal, the processing of the signals computationally. Second is to understand the psychoacoustics, the ear as an instrument. So how does the frequencies, the vibration, represent as a frequency spectrum?
Right.
Now that goes to your brain where the frequencies get a meaning. So that's the cognition aspect. If I have the Tanpura and Sa Re Ga Ma Pa, it finds that relative intervals and gets the names. That's the cognition. But the final stage, which involves your memory, is the recognition, where you have to have some vocabulary stored in your memory. Like Sa Ga Re Ga Ba Ma Ga. You say, okay, this is bilaval. Now, unless you have learned what a bilaval is, this is just a Sa Ga Re Ga Pa Ma Ga sequence. You don't associate with bilaval. Now, again, when you have these memories, these act as magnets, perceptual magnets. And so I'm not going into that paper, but we have found out that if you are a very avid listener or a learned musician, you are deaf to some differences because these magnets are strong attractors. So if a stimuli is given to you and you are asked to reproduce, and if you find, okay, this is very closely associated with this entity, I know, you forget about the actual stimuli.
Right. You only remember
whatever the prototype stored in your memory. And these were eye-opening for me. Whether I am listening to the actual thing. So the signal being present as a manifested signal and what is your interpretation in brain, the whole process chain is very insightful. And once you have access to both of this, it enriches you as a thinker.
Right. And how does this affect you as a performer? When you're performing, now that you have access to this knowledge as well, what emotions each of your phrases or notes are triggering in your listener? It might or might not be standardized. They can all feel different things, relate to different stuff. But how does that change your outlook as a performer?
What I have started doing now after getting into this experiences and insights, almost after each phrase I stop and think in terms of the global context, not within that rag. For example, there is a very interesting anecdote I'd like to mention. So we all talk about characteristic phrases or puckers. Do we ever talk about non-characteristic phrases?
Not really.
Not really. But if you just sing the variations of the puckers, will it be a good performance?
No. There will be that underlying monotony which will get you.
Exactly. So it's like the characteristic phrases are like ornaments. But if you don't have the skeleton, where do you put them?
Right.
So you have to have the body of the rag that constructs and holds. And then there can be a one-to-many mapping. So you sing a phrase. So when you're thinking about a rag, many times your memory and like intuition gets locked onto that. And your vision is not broad anymore. So I consciously try to break free from that.
Right.
Like say, ga, ma, now you can think the Rageshri.
Yes.
But did you think ga, ma, da, ba, can go to Nadbaro? Now sa, ga, ma, da, it's any khamaj.
Yeah.
So you can think of Rageshri, khamaj and those angs. Ne, ba, ma, ra. So that ahir is a khamaj thing, right?
Right.
So these are the kind of things I tend to think more now. So what makes a kalyan? So these kind of questions, yeah.
Now coming to your life as a performer, you have sang concerts worldwide and you've encountered lots of different types of audience. Now I really want to ask you, how is the difference in reception when it comes to Indian listeners who have had this music in their country for ages and listeners who are not a part of this culture? So what is the difference in their outlook when they listen to your music, like from your own concert experiences?
Sure. You all have listened to foreign languages, right?
Right.
Did you ever imagine you are listening to one known language being spoken in a different way? No, I would say please practice that.
Fatality.
So what we do, again coming back again to the motor theory of speech, you cannot perceive unless you talk it out silently. So what happens is you use your own learned grammar to interpret a language.
Right.
So what we do, like for example, I stay in Arabs. Now I started learning Arabic now, but if it's a foreign language to me, the phonemes get interpolated to the closest one, what is in my vocabulary in different languages. So it will start, if you like put an algorithm, phoneme X coming in, it maps to, you have 7 languages in your vocabulary, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, it matches, gets the highest likelihood, locks in there. The sequence comes in, interpolates a word. Now from this 6 language, I think this is the word.
Right.
It gets mapped, nearest neighbor. Then few words, you are locked. Okay, this language is being spoken. The rest of it, you think it's a version of Bengali. So that's how brain works. So always you use your own grammar to interpret other languages. Now if I think of music as a language, so everyone who is like encultured into a specific repertoire, they use their grammar to interpret you. Like for example, if a Western music is being played and I don't know the vocabulary, I'll think, okay, this is a variation of Rag Jajavanti.
Yes.
So I always latch on to what I know and then map the variation.
Right.
So that's what's happened. So I would say it's necessary for us when we perform outside just to give a very little context of what is the thing that to expect and what are the things to follow.
Right.
So that kind of, it's not about educating them, but giving them some guidelines or hand-holding them little bit to follow, because otherwise it may get little too abstract.
Like relatability and engagement.
Yes,
basically.
absolutely. So we don't want to make them understand the music, but still how to enjoy this music.
Right.
One perspective, that helps.
Right. And coming to foreign countries again, how is the experience staying in the Middle East and pursuing Hindustani classical music, not just at a performance level, but you have also been a visiting faculty at Malhar School of Arts, and you're doing such groundbreaking work with machine learning. They're like based out of there. So how is life in general for a classical musician staying in the Middle East?
Well, yeah, that's very exciting. I would say more in terms of collaborations with the local Arab musicians. So recently I was a part of commission from the Department of Culture Tourism in Abu Dhabi government, and it was a commission with Egyptian musicians. So we had 4 days to brainstorm and come up with a concert repertoire, and then we were fascinated how like exchangeable ideas we share. And then I sang some of their melodies, they sang some of our melodies, and it was the best experience ever. Like how we interpret rhythm,
Right.
how we interpret melody. It's a different script, but the same language.
Now, coming to this point, this what you're telling us, this is widely accepted all around the world as fusion music. Now, I, as a musician, believe that everything is at the end of fusion music in general. So, I'd like to call all these collaborations that we do, just broadly classify them under world music. So, how has your experience been as a world musician?
Okay, very deep question. I have to think. I think fusion is something what we do with ourselves, because the melody, the lyrics, the timbre, the dynamics. So these are the bare minimum things we are always fusing while we present our music, be it vocal, be it instrumental.
Right.
Then comes the same 4 or 5 or n number of qualities from your percussion, from your melody. So if you're telling about a classical music context, it's 5 into 3 already. So 15 things getting fused to create one performance.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And if you go by this theory, then it's just a scalability. Where you are taking this from different kind of musicians, different kind of genres, different kind of sounds.
Right.
So what I think for those collaborations, it's not the music of it, but the sound of it.
Like Shakti,
Yes.
the biggest
Yeah.
example.
Yeah. So fusion is happening everywhere, like with yourself.
Absolutely, absolutely. Like, I am always pro fusion music because I believe that if everyone is educated and aware about the music that they are making, the things that they have learned, and the things that they are trying to progress, they are basically trying to give back to music, right? That's what we're all trying to do.
Yeah.
So I think fusion in that sense creates a beautiful, like, it's a collection of tributaries into one big river. And now coming to Indian music again, I read a very interesting paper that you had written called The Indianness of Indian Music. Like, it really appealed to me. And I want to ask you that right now, when we talk about Indian music, Bollywood music is always at the forefront. Like, they are the poster boys, the flag bearers of India at this point. Now, do you think there is, at some point, Bollywood music might or might not be the truest representation of Indian music? Of course, it has all our Indian elements, but again, as we just discussed, everything is fusion at this point, and it's just a broader picture of world music being painted. So how do you think Indian music can, like, what is Indian music at this point? How is the Indianness of it defined?
Wow, I first must congratulate you for reading my work so deeply. And I would have loved to have a briefing before, like this is a paper from 10 years back. I wrote this in 2014 and now you're asking.
Like, this is what we call Upaj.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm having fun. So, okay, now music is very abstract. Coming to, say, food. Can you define Indian food? No. It's so diverse.
Absolutely.
Can you define an Indian language? No. So the question of what is an Indian music itself is a very loaded question. So now what we can say, Indian art music. So about the art music, what are the folk elements? What are the natural sound elements? So it's the classical music. So what is classical about a classical music? It can be reverse engineered to find patterns.
Right.
Find repeated concepts. And that makes it classical. So there's a rule. So for the Indian music, if we talk about, say, Hindustani in particular, there are certain rules. In Carnatic, they have rationalized, I would say, more theoretically and thoroughly. Like, you can read a book and understand the nuances. not so much always for Indian, like Hindustani music. So for Indian music, I would more focus on the art music aspect. So the historical evolution of the musical scales, for example. So how from the Vedic era, the scale started including 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 notes. But the fundamental question is why it ended at 7 notes. I'm talking about the diatonic scale.
Right.
Now, if you go by the Indian philosophy, so there are Indianness about those. Now, this diatonic scale is very worldwide, but Indians had their rationalization. For example, the just intonation tuning. So that's the natural tuning, the Swayambhu Gandhar of the Tanpura. So these are some concepts that Indians have contributed, and there are evidences for that. So I talk more about those things in Indianness, about Indian music. And if we care about them, then we have treasures to further discover.
Absolutely. And not just discover, we can make them progress as well, because these ideas, even though they're age old, they have barely been explored ever since that prototype of the idea.
They have won the battle of time.
Right.
So that's why they are classical.
Now, as a performer, what is your most favorite thing about being a performer, and what is the least favorite thing about being a performer?
Okay, tricky question. I have to be diplomatic.
That's okay. We are very edgy, so you can be edgy.
Yeah, sure. Of course, the pleasure of it, the sense of responsibility, where you are the face, where a number of audience is looking to you to create something. So you are the creator on stage and they are looking up to you. So that sense of responsibility is something really I respect.
Right.
And if we talk about perks of it, we get to travel a lot, we get to meet new people, we get to go new places.
Right.
And everything is inspiring. So I'm not talking about the logistical or financial part of it, but the inspiration aspect of it. Like you go to Rajasthan and you sing Mand, and the way they react is very rewarding. So these are the kind of joy and pleasure and the cheer I look up to. I don't know about the other question, how to answer that, but in general, if the artist's ego supersedes the sanctity of the rag, that is something I would not tolerate as a performer. So it's the rag that takes the first seat. I would not go into terminologies like servant and all, or like we're doing worship. That's too like metaphysical a word for me.
Yes.
But we are doing justice to what we have learned, and we are sincerely trying to do our best to get that experience, that pleasure we get while doing in Riyaz.
Right.
So again, coming back to what I said before, like the effortlessness, the relaxedness. So the enjoyment, if you can convey that same enjoyment, that radiates. So if the artistic ego, like I am doing this is my dexterity, that my element comes forward, that is something I don't think that's an ideal situation of a performance. That affects the whole vibe.
Now, coming to your Riyaz, since you mentioned this, now you have to balance a lot of different alter egos. Dr. Kaustuv Kanti Ganguli, the researcher, the educator, the performer. So how's your Riyaz schedule like amidst all of the engagements that you have?
Did you understand that this 45 minutes we have been talking, this has been a Riyaz for me?
Absolutely.
So this is how I do Riyaz, like driving, cooking, watching a show. Every time is a Riyaz. The thing is how you are using that time in an effective way to better your performance. And performance is not about only singing, it's about conceiving the thing.
Right.
Like for example, I was listening to a Bollywood song again, taking a reference, while driving back from Dubai. It's a very famous song or like composed by Shivji. And a very like atypical sequence that occurred to me that we haven't really learned as a rag. Like sa ni dha ma ga re sa ni. And it struck me so much that 1 hour drive, I was just doing riyas for that while driving.
That's like the whole tone scale as they call it.
Now this is not a standard rag in Indian music, but it was intriguing. So that's the riyas for me.
Very interesting.
Yeah. So these are some examples. Like on stage, it's a different kind of riyaz. Off stage, you're wanting to achieve something, that's a different kind of riyaz. So again, coming back to how to make it interesting. So maybe some young performers, they want to get inspiration. So my riyaz sessions has been a performance itself. Like I have never used a Shuddha Swar scale to riyaz a sapat. So I started maybe with a Matale Khayal or a Vilambit Khayal and use the context. So for me, the highest risk is not to take a risk.
Always be prepared for everything.
See, the thing is, when we are performing, there may be something at fault.
Right.
Maybe the sound which is not in your control. Maybe for that someone misses a bit or some wrong notes come in. But as a team, our goal is to like sabka galatiya chupana.
Right.
So how to do that? You have to make it a reflex. Now, for example, when you are driving, are you thinking about changing gears? It's a reflex.
Yes.
So if you are singing, why do you have to think about something? So to bring that reflex effortlessly is riyaz.
Right. Right.
So I use this phrase, maybe you find it interesting. Ghalti se mistake mat karna. So I have done hours of practice being wrongful, so that I can simulate the wrong in so perfectly that I never go there. I know what is wrong.
You just trained your brain so hard, and your motor skills also, and the awareness and
So
the presence
this
of
is the
mind.
fun thing of riyaz. For example, in Rag we say we explore the space of variability.
Right.
Now, when does a Rag becomes wrong? So you ask about Indianness of Indian music. I am asking about Raganess of Ragas.
Yeah, when it's not creating the desired impact that you have heard.
What is the
that
benchmark?
rag.
What is desired impact?
Yes, again, the benchmark I think comes from our listening, like how we grew up listening to the ustads.
How subjective is that?
It's very subjective because there are so many gharanas.
So how do you cater to each one's expectation?
That is like beyond my skills to explain.
So that's the thing. So you have to stretch your boundaries to find until when something will be regarded as artistic liberty, to have poetic justice, and when it's wrong.
As we see in a lot of renditions by Vilad Khan Sahab, he's stretching the raga. Kishori, Aman Karji.
So that's the artistic liberty, but they had to get to that stretcher.
It's some
to
super extreme ragdari going on.
But again, coming back to more technically manageable questions. Now, a rag is a very broad in scope when there is no neighbors.
Right.
But when you sing Puriya, you're always afraid of Marwa and Sohini. When you sing Deshka, you are afraid of Bhopali.
Yes.
So these neighbors make your boundaries very constricted. But now what happens has a tendency many a times. Again, I'm generalizing, like taking the claim to me, not any others. It happens that there is a chance that I can go wrong. You play very safe.
Right.
And then your variability is constrained to an extent, it's predictable. Then what's the fun?
Right.
So then I started asking where I can draw a boundary between them. And there is research, again, not coming into the details, to simulate the no man's land phrases and finding where listeners find the boundary.
Right. What is that middle ground where the rag does not get compromised and you're able to express yourself freely?
Like you start with green, you go to blue. And you create a continuum. Green, bluish green, greenish blue, blue.
Right.
Now, if you have 20 such stimuli in continuum, you can estimate maybe after the 7th year, they will classify as blue and green.
Right.
So why not do this for ragas?
That is a very thoughtful and interesting thing you just said. And I am really glad that you're also pursuing your research in this, and hopefully we'll be able to see something new again very soon. So that's what my next question is also, by the way. What's in store for Dr. Kaustuv Kanti Ganguli?
Okay, maybe I'll briefly address you. You made me wear 3 hats, like educator, doctor, performer. So, and many times I get this question: how do you manage 2, 3, 4 different things? My answer is I perceive this as a one thing. If I have the burden of justifying 2 things, my time gets divided.
Right.
But if I'm in unison of all the things together, it's a holistic thing. I'm doing the one thing. It takes time, yes. It takes attention, yes. It takes effort, yes. But I'm willing to do that.
Right.
So that's the wearing hat. So now the hat has a super hat. So I don't distinguish anything again.
It's like a very big hat which you're just wearing.
That's it. And what's new? Something definitely is in store very, very soon. You all will get, but I may give you a hint. I'm getting more into an experiential aspect of it.
Okay.
So one is technical, one is more aesthetic. The third thing is experiential. Like you listen to music nowadays, you go to a concert. You're not just listening; you also see, right?
Yes.
The visual aspect takes some element of the impression how you listen, and there are like audiovisual paradoxes. If you see something that takes the precedence, your listening goes overheard. I'm getting some more sensory experiences into this, so that's all I'll reveal.
It'll be very interesting, and again, Team Upaj will be waiting really eagerly to catch you again after you release these.
Sure.
Now, coming to the end of our interview, the last question I have for you is, we have, like, as you spoke about the institutionalization of ICM, people are being trained as both listeners and musicians in this process. So what advice do you have to all our budding listeners and practitioners of Hindustani music?
Great, like you are making me so experienced to comment on these broad things, but I would say listening is of many kinds. One is of listening for pleasure, one is listening to enjoy, and one is listening to learn. So if you are an aspiring performer, you have to engage cognitively. So the cognitive mode while listening is very important. And that's how we are bringing some tools maybe that will help, say that indexing the Dhani Re of Marwa, because when you are listening at a stretch, human memory capacity, the working memory doesn't permit you to store such information or compute long-term correlations. So there will be tools coming in, and we are working on that to have better listening tools, extraction tools where you can focus on guided listening to yourself.
I was just about to ask you, this is like a guided listening medium, but generated automatically.
Yes. And I am working on making a flexible framework where you can question and the generative model creates that for you. Where the world is heading now with OpenAI, ChatGPT, the generative models, it's intelligent, it's getting smarter. And again, because you have talked about AI, I am trying to move slowly towards artificial wisdom. So artificial intelligence is still smart system, but the decision-making capacity is based on causality. But it cannot anticipate based on other context to a greater extent. Like, for example, why Wall Street is still relevant, where we have so strong AI. That experience is still with humans.
That's the difference between intelligence and wisdom there.
And that's where the world is heading. So hopefully you'll get something exciting there too.
Now, just before closing this up, I thought I wouldn't ask this, but I think I'll end up doing this. Do you think this can be potentially dangerous in the future in any way?
Okay, depends. I have a very clear answer for this. I'm not.
I think a lot of people ask you this, right?
Being in this field, I have to have my vision very clear. So it depends on who decides how to use this. And again, this is not in terms of developers or musicians or creators. It's again a very socio-political thing, like where the money and power is.
Right.
So the system will be guided by that, and we are nowhere to control. But if it's in good hands, it's safe. It will never replace. It will make things more efficient, letting you focus more on creative thinking, problem solving, analytics, those kind of things. But again, coming back to your question, for performers, while you perform, devote.
Or you'll be replaced by singing robots at one point.
So that's the fun element of it. But again, wearing the hats, like, don't be too cerebral, be thinking musician, but then that surrender really matters, because if Rag is willing, then the performance will be effective. And I truly believe that theory.
Absolutely. That's what we've all been taught since we stepped into this.
Yeah.
But thank you so much for agreeing to do this. It was a wonderful interview, and we really kicked off season 2 today. It's a very interesting interview. Probably one of the most intense ones that I've conducted, and I'm really happy that you agreed for this.
Sure, pleasure is all mine, and I should thank you for having delved down deep into my work. This is the first of its kind interview where the interviewer is so knowledgeable about my work, and it's so exciting. And
even in season 1, we used to work really hard on researching on our guests. That's why we ended up with really long interviews. But again, you don't mind, right? That's very informative. So all of you, we would like to say goodbye to you today, and a very good night. Thank you again for coming. And if you want to check Dr. Ganguli's YouTube channel or read his publications, I'll be posting all the links right here in the description box. And we'd really like to thank the Monkey Head Academy of Music for giving us this amazing space, and Illumin Studios for the audio. We would really like to thank Gina Howladar and Siddhisha for helping us with the video. And if you want any photography or video stuff done, Gina's Instagram handle and her production house, I've linked everything here in the description below. And thank you for staying with us, and welcome back to Upaj. We're here on season 2 and we're here to stay. So good night, guys. See you again. Namaste.
Thank you. Have a good one.